My mother gave my $85,000 college fund to my gifted cousin. 6 years later, I handed her an invoice for the hospital deposit. "You can sit in the back," my mother said, sliding the restaurant check presenter away from me like I was the waitress. Then she lifted her champagne glass, smiled at my cousin Ava, and announced to 23 people that the reason Ava was graduating debt-free from medical school was because some children are worth investing in. The table laughed. I didn't. Because the money she was toasting with had my name on it first, and because the phone vibrating in my purse at that exact moment was from St. Vincent's admitting office, calling for the 3rd time about my mother's emergency surgical deposit. She had no idea I was the one they'd been told to contact. I didn't say a word at that table, but before dessert hit the plates, 3 people were staring at their phones. One aunt had gone pale, and my mother's smile started to crack. What nobody at that restaurant knew was that I'd been keeping every receipt, every voicemail, every bank transfer confirmation, and one very specific letter with my mother's signature on it for 6 years. And what my mother definitely didn't know was that the invoice I was about to hand her wasn't for money I expected her to pay. It was proof. And once I put it on the table, the entire family would finally understand who'd really been carrying her all along. It was my grandmother's 75th birthday, held in the private room at Bellamonte Italian Grill, the one with the fake fireplace, the velvet curtains, and the wall of framed wine bottles nobody was allowed to touch. My mother had dressed for the occasion like she was accepting an award. Cream blazer, gold bracelet stack, the pearl earrings she only wore when she wanted to look expensive. Ava sat to her right in a white dress with a stethoscope charm necklace, because apparently becoming a doctor wasn't enough, unless everyone at the table could see the branding. I got seated near the service door, next to the ice bucket and the toddler cousin who kept dropping breadsticks. Not an accident. My mother had done that kind of thing my whole life. She never yelled in public. She curated. Placement, tone, omission. Tiny acts of ranking, disguised as logistics. When people asked what I'd been up to, she answered for me. "Lena does admin work," she said lightly, before I could open my mouth. Admin work. Like I alphabetized paper clips for a living. Not, Lena runs operations for a private surgical recovery firm. Not, Lena manages payroll, staffing, billing disputes, and vendor contracts for 3 clinics. Not, Lena bought her own condo at 28. Just admin work. Ava got her introduction like a royal procession. Our brilliant Ava is finishing her residency offers. Top of her class, full of purpose. We always knew she was special. Then she put her hand on Ava's wrist and said it. Some investments just make more sense. Everybody heard it. Everybody understood it. And everybody pretended not to. What they didn't know was that investment had an exact number. $85,412. I knew because I'd memorized it from the transfer statement. In my family, I was the practical one, which sounds harmless until you hear how they said it. Ava was brilliant. I was practical. Ava was exceptional. I was steady. Ava was the future. I was good with people. That was the lie they told themselves because it made what happened to me easier to digest. See, when I was 17, I got into 2 schools. One was a state university with a partial scholarship. The other was a private college in Boston with a business analytics program I'd worked half of high school to qualify for. I'd spent 3 years stacking AP classes, working weekends at a pharmacy, and tutoring freshmen for extra cash. My guidance counselor cried when the acceptance email came in. I thought the hard part was over. Then, my mother sat me down at our kitchen table with a mug of coffee she didn't offer me, and explained, in that calm, managerial voice of hers, that the market had shifted, the account had been restructured, and the college fund situation was more complicated than I understood. At 17, that sounded possible. At 28, I know what she meant was this. The money was gone, and she'd already decided I would be easier to disappoint. The story she told everybody afterward was elegant. There had never been as much as I thought. I'd exaggerated. I had scholarships anyway. I was resilient. I was independent. I was not the type who needs hand-holding. It made me sound admirable. It made her look blameless. And it erased the part where my father, before he died when I was 12, had built that fund, dollar by dollar, automatic transfer by automatic transfer, with my name listed as beneficiary on the original paperwork. What my mother didn't realize was that I stopped being naive the day she lied too smoothly. A month after that kitchen table speech, while she was at Ava's piano recital, I went into the hall closet, pulled down the gray lockbox she thought I didn't know about, and found the folder. There were tax records, insurance papers, my father's old life policy documents, and underneath them, the college account file. The original balance history was there. So was the withdrawal authorization, and the reissued disbursement request. Not to me, to my Aunt Denise as temporary educational custodian for Ava. I remember reading it twice because I thought my brain was swapping names around from shock. Then I saw my mother's signature. Then I saw the transfer amount, $85,412.63. My father's money, my college fund, moved in 2 transactions, 11 days apart. I didn't confront her that night. That was the first adult decision I ever made. I put every page back exactly where I found it. Then I took pictures of all of it on my old cracked iPhone and emailed them to a secret Gmail account with the subject line, "Read this when you start doubting yourself." 3 weeks later, my mother sent me a text at 11:42 p.m. "You'll thank me one day for forcing you to be strong." I screenshotted that too. Strength, as it turned out, looked ugly before it looked impressive. I went to the state school. I commuted the first year because I couldn't afford campus housing. My car had no air conditioning. One summer, The driver's side window got stuck halfway down, and I spent July with a towel jammed into the gap every time it rained. I worked mornings at a dental office, classes in the afternoon, restaurant shifts at night. I learned how to do payroll because the office manager quit. I learned contracts because the dentist got audited. I learned billing because insurance companies stall like it's a hobby. Meanwhile, Ava became family mythology. There were holiday speeches about her future, fundraisers disguised as brunches. One Christmas, my mother gave Ava a leather laptop bag and handed me a planner. "Because you're organized," she said. It never stopped being deliberate. But here's the part they never understood. When people treat you like labor instead of legacy, you end up learning how everything works. I learned what things cost. I learned how institutions protect themselves. I learned how to read financial records, intake forms, debt notices, and contract terms without getting emotional. Most importantly, I learned how quickly powerful people panic when the paperwork stops favoring them. By 24, I was operations manager at a post-surgical recovery company. At 26, I helped open a second facility. At 27, I negotiated our vendor contracts so aggressively that our CEO gave me a discretionary bonus larger than what my mother used to brag Ava got in scholarships. I kept receipts, without meaning to at first, my mother asking me to help with her insurance appeal because you're good at this office stuff. My Aunt Denise forwarding me overdue notices, just in case you understand what they're saying. Ava texting me at 1:13 a.m. asking if I could review her student loan consolidation options because numbers make my eyes cross. They all thought I was background machinery, useful, quiet, permanent. So when my mother started having health issues at 58, nothing dramatic at first, just fainting spells, fatigue, shortness of breath. Guess who she called to help schedule the specialists? Not her gifted investment. Me. I booked the cardiology consult. I explained the out-of-network warning. I organized the medication list. I even fixed a coding error on a lab claim that would have cost her $3,600. She thanked me by telling people at church that Ava was guiding us medically. Ava hadn't even returned her call. Then came the ambulance ride. Then came the hospital estimate. Then came the number that made everything line up. $18,750 due as a surgical deposit before the procedure could be scheduled. And the admitting coordinator asked a simple question: who is financially responsible if the patient cannot pay? I was in my office when they called. Gray rain outside, fluorescent lights overhead, spreadsheet open, lunch untouched. The coordinator's voice was tired, professional, kind in the way people are when they've already had 3 difficult families before noon. My mother had listed me, not Ava, not my Aunt Denise, not the cousin who got the $85,000. Me. I asked the coordinator to repeat it. She did. Full name, emergency contact, secondary financial communication authorization. Signed electronically 2 nights earlier. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was perfect. That evening, I checked the family group chat. 47 unread messages about Grandma's birthday dinner, table flowers, parking, whether Ava should wear navy or cream. Not one message about the hospital deposit. Not one. I said nothing. The next morning, my mother left me a voicemail. Soft voice, slightly breathless, performing vulnerability now. "Hi, sweetheart. Tiny favor. The hospital is being ridiculous about some pre-admission forms, and they may contact you because you're just so much better at handling administrative things than I am." Administrative things. There it was again. Same word, same box she'd kept me in. Only now the box was doing cardiac intake. I saved the voicemail. Then I requested copies of every authorization she'd submitted involving my name. Perfectly legal, perfectly ordinary. My role entitled me to know what communication permissions existed if I was listed as responsible contact. And there it was. My mother had not only listed me, she had checked the box agreeing that I could be contacted regarding financial liability and pre-service obligations. Meaning, she volunteered me to clean up her emergency without even asking. I still didn't confront her, because by then the family dinner was 3 days away. And I'd just had an idea that was so cold, so clean, and so deserved, I actually closed my office door before I smiled. I built the folder that night, not out of rage, out of order. First page, the hospital surgical deposit estimate with the amount highlighted. Second page, the authorization listing me as responsible contact. Third page, a typed invoice on my company letterhead template. Not official from my employer, obviously, just professionally formatted, itemizing 6 years of unpaid administrative and financial emergency support rendered to immediate family, including insurance appeals, billing corrections, transportation coordination, medication management, home care scheduling, and account reconciliation assistance. At the bottom, in clean black font, one line, credit applied against prior family misappropriation, $85,412.63. Balance remaining morally owed. Substantial. Then I added the proof packet behind it, the transfer statements, the custodian change, my mother's signature, her 11:42 p.m. text, screenshots of messages where Ava thanked me for fixing paperwork related to the education my money had funded, voicemails, dates, amounts, nothing dramatic, nothing messy, just enough. I printed 3 copies, one for my mother, one for Aunt Denise, one for myself. Then I put them in cream envelopes and drove to Grandma's birthday dinner. By the time I got there, my mother was in full performance mode, cheek-kissing relatives, correcting the host on the pronunciation of our last name, and steering everyone toward Ava like she was the evening's centerpiece. When she saw me, she glanced at my dress first. Navy, simple, fitted. No jewelry except my watch. "You made it," she said, like I'd almost failed a test. Then quieter, smiling through her teeth. "Try not to be difficult tonight. This is important for Ava." For Ava. at Grandma's birthday dinner. That told me everything about how automatic her disrespect had become. So I smiled back and said, "Of course, I brought paperwork." She actually relaxed, because that's how little she understood danger when it wore my face. 40 minutes later, after the appetizer plates were cleared, she stood to make the toast that should have stayed in her throat forever. She talked about sacrifice, family loyalty, recognizing talent, helping the ones who can truly do something meaningful. Then she lifted her glass toward Ava and said, "Sometimes you have to make hard choices with limited resources. But when one child is extraordinary, you do what you must." I heard the little sounds people make when they agree with something ugly because it's been packaged as wisdom. Exactly. So true. Then my Uncle Barry, already pink from wine, laughed and said, "Well, Lena always lands on her feet." That line hit harder than the toast, because that's what people say when they benefit from your pain long enough that your survival starts looking convenient. I let the silence stretch. Then I reached into my bag. "I'm glad we're finally talking about hard choices," I said. The room shifted, not loudly, just enough. Forks paused. My cousin's toddler stopped singing to his breadstick. Grandma looked up. I placed the first envelope in front of my mother, the second in front of Aunt Denise. Then I kept the third in my lap. My mother gave a little laugh. "What is this?" "The deposit you volunteered me for," I said, "and the invoice for what you've already cost me." Her face changed, but only around the eyes. She opened the envelope. I watched her land first on the hospital estimate, then the authorization with my name, then the invoice. She flipped to the transfer record, and that was the moment the color left her. Aunt Denise opened hers 2 seconds later and made a small choking sound. Ava leaned over. "Mom?" Nobody at the table laughed this time. Then my mother did the thing she always did when cornered. She tried to control the room before anyone else could read it for themselves. "This is completely inappropriate," she said sharply, lowering her voice as if that could shrink the moment. "Lena, we are not doing this here." I looked around the table. "You toasted your decision here," I said. "So yes, we are." My Uncle Barry reached for the paper nearest him. My mother tried to grab it first, but he was faster. He read the first page, then the second, then frowned and said too loudly, "Wait, she listed you as financially responsible?" My mother snapped, "That's not what that means." "It literally is," I said. Ava took the transfer statement from Denise's shaking hand. I watched her eyes move across the number, the date, her own name. "No," she whispered. "Mom?" Aunt Denise started talking immediately, the way guilty people do when the facts arrive before their excuse is ready. "It was temporary. It was supposed to be sorted out. Your mother said there were account complications, and Ava had already committed to the program." "With my money," I said. My mother leaned toward me, voice low and venomous. "You are humiliating me." And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "I'm documenting you." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Not waved. Set. Then I hit play on her voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart. Tiny favor. The hospital is being ridiculous about some pre-admission forms, and they may contact you because you're just so much better at handling administrative things than I am." Nobody moved. Then I opened the screenshot of her text from 6 years earlier and turned the brightness all the way up. "You'll thank me one day for forcing you to be strong." Grandma held out her hand. "Let me see that." I passed her the phone. My grandmother read slower than she used to, but not so slow she missed cruelty. When she looked up at my mother, it was with the flat expression of a woman revising 30 years of assumptions in real time. "You took her father's money?" Grandma asked. The room went dead. My mother started crying. Too fast. That was almost the most insulting part. Not because tears are fake by default, but because hers always arrived the second accountability did. "I did what I had to do," she said, hand over chest. "Ava had a future. Lena was always so capable. I knew she'd be fine." There it was, the whole family doctrine, finally spoken in plain English. I robbed the daughter I thought could survive it to finance the one I preferred. Ava still hadn't looked up from the paperwork, and when she finally did, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her mother. "You told me Grandma helped," Ava said, voice thin. Aunt Denise opened and closed her mouth. "You said there was a family education pool." Nobody answered. Ava's face did something strange then. Not guilt exactly. Collapse. Like a bridge realizing the support underneath it had been theater. She looked at me. "You knew?" "For 6 years," I said. Her eyes filled instantly. "Why didn't you tell me?" That question would have broken me once. Instead, I said, "Because none of you were interested in the truth while the lie was paying." Uncle Barry pushed his chair back. My cousin Melissa actually muttered, "Oh my God." Grandma set my phone down with care and said to my mother, "At my birthday?" My mother tried one last pivot. "Lena is exaggerating. She always resented Ava." I reached into my bag again and handed Grandma the original photo printout of the transfer authorization. Signature visible, date visible, name visible. No interpretation required. Grandma didn't even ask for reading glasses. "Don't insult me too," she said. And that was the crack that split the room. Because family systems survive on uncertainty, on maybe, on miscommunication, on emotional fog. But once the oldest person in the room decides the facts are the facts, everybody else scrambles to relocate their loyalty before the shame splashes onto them too. Suddenly there were questions. "You used her father's account? Did Dad know? How much exactly? Why is Lena on the hospital papers? Why didn't Ava pay for the deposit if she benefited?" That last one landed hard. Ava stared at the table. Because here was the part nobody liked. She was 30 now, employed, engaged, driving a leased Mercedes, posting Santorini throwbacks with captions about gratitude and grace. And yet when my mother needed real money, real logistics, real emergency support, she still reached for me, the daughter she demoted. I stood up slowly, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted every eye to follow. "I'm not paying your deposit," I said to my mother. Tears were rolling now, but her face had hardened underneath them. "After everything I did for you." I laughed then, once, short, involuntary. Everything you did for me? I said. You mean the part where you stole my college fund, told me adversity was character building, used me as unpaid staff for 6 years, and then put my name on your hospital liability forms without permission? The waiter chose that moment to step in with the main courses, saw the table, and backed out so fast he nearly hit the wine shelf. Good. Let there be witnesses everywhere. I'm done being your backup plan, I said, and I'm done carrying the cost of what you did just because I carried it well. Then I turned to Ava. You wanted proof? There it is. What you do with it is your business. Her voice cracked. I didn't know. I know, I said, but you benefited anyway. That hurt her more than if I'd screamed, because it was true. I could have left then. That would have been enough. But my mother made one final mistake. She said my father's name. He would have wanted family helped, she said, desperate now, reaching for holiness because facts weren't working. Your father believed in supporting promise. I leaned down and took the last sheet from my envelope. A letter, 1 page, dated 8 months before he died. His handwriting, square and heavy, from the rehab facility where he'd spent those last weeks recovering after surgery. I'd found it in the same lockbox years ago and kept it hidden because some part of me knew this day would come. It was addressed to me, not legally dramatic, not some movie monologue, just my father being my father. Lena, you are the one I never worry about because you notice everything. But that doesn't mean you should receive less. It means when I am gone, I need you to remember that being dependable is not permission for people to take from you. This fund is yours, not because you need help more than anyone else, but because it is my job to leave you what I can. I didn't read it aloud. I handed it to my mother. She looked at the first line and broke, not gracefully, not quietly. Her shoulders caved, her mouth opened. No sound came out for a second. Then Grandma said, "Enough." 1 word. That was all. But it landed like a gavel. Aunt Denise started apologizing. To me, to Ava, to the table. My Uncle Barry swore under his breath and walked out to make a call, which in our family meant spread the truth before anyone else could rewrite it. Ava stood up, removed the little stethoscope charm necklace, and set it beside her untouched plate, like it had become too heavy to wear. Then she said to her mother, "If Lena got the bill, you can use my ring fund." Her fiancé, to his credit, didn't argue. He just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, finally seeing the architecture of the family he was marrying into. My mother looked at me through smeared mascara and whispered, "You planned this." And that was the cleanest part. "Yes," I said, because revenge is sloppy when it's fueled by rage, but when it's built on timing, paper, and truth, it barely raises its voice. I left before the entrees came back out. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed 9 times before I reached my car. 2 calls from my mother, 1 from Denise, 3 texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in months, 1 from Ava. "I'm transferring the deposit tonight. You should have had the fund. I'm sorry." 1 from Grandma. "Come see me tomorrow. Bring copies." And 1 from the hospital coordinator, confirming a new payment source had been added to the account and that I had been removed from financial communication authorization. That one I read twice. Then I sat in my car with the engine off and let the silence settle over me. Not healing, not closure, something better, weight redistribution. Over the next week, the family rearranged itself exactly the way families do when a private truth goes public. Relatives who once called me strong started using different words: wronged, used, overlooked. Funny how vocabulary expands when receipts appear. Aunt Denise mailed a handwritten apology with a cashier's check for $12,000. Not enough to matter financially, more than enough to matter symbolically. Ava sold the Mercedes lease, postponed the engagement party, and sent me a packet of documents showing every educational disbursement she could trace. She didn't ask me to forgive her. Smartest thing she'd done in years. Grandma changed her will. I know because she told me herself while pouring tea in her kitchen, hands steady as ever. And my mother? She had the surgery. The deposit got paid. The family made sure of it, now that the right names were attached to the burden. But she never again used the phrase, "my capable daughter," like it was a tool. She never again introduced me as someone who does admin work. She never again volunteered my labor in a room where witnesses existed. Because once people see the machine, it stops looking like magic. It starts looking like theft. A month later, she asked if we could talk. I told her she could email. She did. 3 paragraphs, half apology, half self-defense. Lots of pain language, not much ownership. I archived it. Some things don't deserve a reply. She spent my future betting I'd survive it. She was right about that. What she got wrong was thinking survival would make me stay small.